Hello, everyone, and welcome to Israel Forever's monthly program on the 7th to commemorate another passing of a month since October 7th, the date that changed all of our lives. So much of the world has been altered since October 7th, and we all are still living in a space where we can't necessarily breathe easily, especially now as the threats against Israel and Jews everywhere continue to increase. We are honored to welcome you tonight to our online virtual gathering, our program, which allows us this month to focus on the stories of our soldiers, the brave young men and women who have been on the front lines since the first hours of the onslaught by the Nazi terrorists we call Hamas today. Because it's very difficult for people to be able to coordinate with their own mindset how today's reality corresponds with events in history. And one of the most important distinctions is that in Nazi era, so fresh as a trauma in our mind, we did not have soldiers to defend us. And yet, in this attack by Hamas, very much our soldiers were instrumental to helping to save those who could be saved, the hundreds who lost their lives, and the hundreds who continue to have fallen since the war has been ongoing all of these months. So much attention being paid to the hostages, to the media. We often forget to share the personal stories, to understand the personal experiences of these soldiers who faced Hamas terrorists head on, how they are coping during ongoing fighting, and how those of us who maybe don't have direct experience with the soldiers are actually connecting through their stories or through our own imagination of what it must be like to be in the field. Unfortunately, those of us who are outsiders to that experience are seeing many different fronts to this war. We're seeing the soldiers who are our defenders on the front lines being attacked and demonized in the international media, as if every action of our soldiers is questionable and is based on morals and values that are somehow distorted so easily by the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist campaigns that are gaining in power in every possible medium. Tonight, we had a number of soldiers who are going to be joining us for this exclusive program. And unfortunately, we have had also many cancellations because, understandably, with the increased threat that is hanging over Israel, with Iran breathing down our neck and threatening us every hour with a different type of psychological terror, the situation on the ground for our soldiers continuously changes and requires, as you might understand, certain approvals and certain releases from the Army to be able to allow soldiers to share their experiences directly with us. So I am truly honored to welcome as one of our speakers, one of our panelists tonight, Rachel Lester, who has been with the IDF spokesperson's unit for years. She's been working on creating videos for their millions of social media followers and running the international video department as creative director. And that is not an easy job. Some of us who've been involved in this industry for so long have watched how the IDF spokesperson's unit has expanded in all of its representation. And wow, it has been amazing to see because it gives other people a slight glimpse into the reality of what the soldiers are up against. And again, we are all soldiers in the war against the Jews today, but we know that there are lessons to be learned from the soldiers who are out in the field. Rachel was called into reserves on October 7th, and she stayed for 6 months. She is now a citizens spokeswoman who is giving daily briefings on social media with the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's Office that has been developed over the recent months and continues to give us really great resources that many people can share onward in their different forums. So Rachel, I'm so happy to welcome you to tonight's program, and I thank you for being with us and sharing your voice.
Hi, thank you so much. Hi everyone. I am Rachel Lester. I'm from Los Angeles. I was born and raised in a very Jewish pro-Israel community, and I always knew that I wanted to do something in the realm of editing videos, but it wasn't until my my summer before graduating college I realized if I'm going to be spending my time making videos about Israel, which is what I was doing all through college, I wanted to do it for the IDF. And I knew about the IDF spokespersons unit, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to be spending my time making videos
Putting
anywhere,
you on the Facebook. Go ahead. Yes.
um, I want to be telling Israel's story from Israel and telling the IDF story from within the IDF. So after I graduated college, which was in 2017, I immediately got on a plane, made Aliyah, and I got to Israel and I enlisted in the IDF, and I was super fortunate that my resume got to the right place at the right time, and I got an interview 2 days before I drafted, right place at the right time, and it was very clear that I was the right person for the job. And they pulled me into the unit, so I went through basic training, and a few weeks later, 6 weeks later, I reported for duty in the Tel Aviv base for the spokesperson's unit, and I started my job making videos, sometimes making graphics, and also sometimes writing English content for the IDF social media pages. So we have pages in English, Spanish, and French. So everything that I do in English is translated also to Spanish and French. And at this point, we have more than 10 million followers on all of our platforms combined. And I started off thinking, okay, I'm 22, 23. I'll do a service of a year, maybe 2 years. We'll see. Then I'll go back to LA. 1 year quickly turned into 2 years, and then we realized that I didn't want to leave. I loved my job. I had the most meaningful service of anybody that I knew, and my commanders didn't want me to leave because I was really, really good at my job. So they created a position for me to stay, and I was brought back immediately after my release to be a civilian employee, meaning that I was in the same department in the same office, but I was wearing civilian clothes like these after 2 years of being a soldier. And I became the person who ran the video department, and I trained the soldiers under me, and I managed all the videos that came out from the department.
I'd
And
like
that's
to hear about that. I'd like to hear about the hands-on with soldiers because we really brought people together tonight to understand that experience. And I think sometimes when we hear only about it from, shall we say, the Hasbara angle, when we hear about just that, that side, we forget that on the other side, their physical fighting that's going on is impacting them and how they tell their story. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's like, trying to
sure.
kind of kind of minimize the trauma that you might be feeling in order to be a spokesperson?
Sure. I was very active in the lone soldier community when I was a soldier. I was constantly in the Facebook groups, venting about my problems and trying to make other people feel better about their problems. And it was incredibly tragic. In the spring of 2019, there was a string of lone soldier suicides, and we all thought we have to do something about this. Something has to change. So I made a video in cooperation with the HR of the IDF, for lack of a better term, that I worked on for 5 months. A month, but then approvals. Basically explaining what are lone soldiers, where did we come from, why do we have these special rights that we have, and what are we going through? What does it mean to be given 8 days off because your parents are flying into Israel to visit you? Or what does it mean to get 30 days off to go visit your hometown, your home country, when you haven't seen home in a year? Everybody else who's in your platoon and your company is
And that
getting.
situation is very exacerbated now. These soldiers, the
Oh,
lone soldiers who are
absolutely.
in service now, are really struggling from that because they're not able to necessarily go back and forth and see family, and family isn't
Yeah.
coming here because they're afraid. Hmm.
Absolutely. First, I'm sure there's plenty of lone soldier families that are afraid to be in Israel, although I will say that my mom is actually visiting right now. She got here about 3 weeks ago, and even though with all the craziness going on, she's still really happy to be here. But I'm sure it's not easy to be making the decision to come visit Israel right now, and the army can't approve every request for people to be traveling back home right now. I mean, people have to be doing their jobs more than ever.
Well, let's talk about their jobs because a part of tonight's goal
Sure.
is to help give outsiders a glimpse, not again, not into the realm of Hasbara, which you and I both work in actively, trying to inform and give all of the facts as needed. But what about the facts about our people? Let's talk a little bit about that soldier's experience. And what does that feel like when you are a soldier in one arena, but you're with fellow soldiers? Do you talk about the stress that you feel? Do you talk about the situation? What might be a piece of, a glimpse into that soldier reality that you could offer to our listeners and our viewers who really
Sure.
they see, people outsiders see a gun and they're like, no, they see uniforms and they're like, wait a second, militaristic. They're like being brainwashed against Israeli soldiers who have been demonized in every way. And our Hasbara efforts, they're, great or lacking or however, and that's a different discussion entirely. But what about our soldiers? How can
I think
we
every soldier
understand for
has,
you?
I think every soldier has a different reality. Every soldier has a different type of job, whether they are doing guard duty in the South or the North or the West Bank, or they're operating the Iron Dome, or they are training a dog to be sniffing out bombs and finding search and rescue pieces, um, training people to go to natural disasters and pull people out of the rubble. There are people who are training to do
Even
special.
now,
Oh,
while
of
we're
course,
fighting this war, you're
of
telling me
course.
that
People are still training all the time. There, every few months, there's still
for
another job.
for another nation's problem, they're training for external issues,
There
external
will be. I
dilemmas.
mean, there will be.
That's
Um,
interesting. No, and
there,
I ask because there's a lot of questions as to what extent Israeli soldiers, I just had this conversation with somebody, to what extent Israeli soldiers actually are available to be able to assist in times of desperate need for diaspora Jews, which a lot is a legitimate fear that a lot of people have.
I think. I think the parts of the IDF that would go do a rescue mission in the diaspora are different than the parts of the IDF that are operating in Gaza and in the north right now. So I do think that if there was some special emergency, Israel would have the capabilities of being able to have a presence.
Interesting.
Um,
Interesting. That's new.
but anyway, so I mentioned all those other jobs that sound really cool and they are really, really meaningful and important. But everybody could have a different experience. You could have a good commander who is really goes the extra mile to give you your rights and your time off and is encouraging and treats you nicely. Or you could have a really bad commander who doesn't understand why you have rights and doesn't afford you those rights, and you have to fight for yourself all the time. I
Mm.
was super fortunate in my position in the spokesperson's unit. My commander was also an immigrant from an English speaking country. So she went through all the same things I did. So she was incredible and always let me have my rights and more, and was never asked any questions about why I needed to go early to do something. But I also never wanted to leave early because I loved my job, making videos for the IDF social media pages. But I've spoken to so many soldiers. Some have had incredible experiences, some have had terrible experiences, and somewhere in the middle is everyone else, where things are meaningful, but things can also get boring and things are hard, but you have moments that make it worthwhile. And every single person is different. It's like asking someone in America, what's it like to have a job? It depends what your job is, depends how qualified you are for it, depends who your boss is, who your coworkers are. It's just such an open-ended
Hmm.
question, not every soldier has a gun. Not every soldier even, every soldier goes through basic training to learn how to shoot, but not every soldier is qualified to shoot a gun in a case of emergency. And that's I guess what my responsibility is, that I represent fighting the digital war, fighting the war online, where people's opinions of the war really matter in, the way that Congress
Right.
acts, the way that world leaders act. Um, yeah, did that answer your question of what it's like
It
to be
does. No, thank you. Because I think it's very interesting. When I was young and we always looked up to the soldiers, right? Those us diaspora Zionists, and we look up to the soldiers and we think, wow, and they're so adorable in their uniform, and it's just always the way that we feel. And yet then we learned their name when soldiers have fallen.
Right.
I even had somebody say to me that it's a shame that the names of injured soldiers are not also shared so that they can be added to our prayers. And of course, yes, there are prayer lists that go around in those knowing communities, where you can get those names, but still the idea is that we learn of a soldier's name once they've fallen. And sometimes people don't
True.
realize that there are so many types of soldiers required in the field, and each one, especially focusing on a post October 7th or a October 7th onward reality, I should say. Everybody took on a very unique role in how they were fighting one of the fronts of this war. And so
Right.
you've shed light for us into how the digital war is a war that actually can incorporate a lot of different people, even if they're not maybe with a gun, in uniform, or maybe even trained. Are you working in any way to help
Well,
others feel like
Everybody's trained. Let me just qualify.
everybody's trained? Everybody's trained. Do you feel like that's a responsibility that Jews everywhere should be a part of? That they should
Absolutely.
share in that responsibility?
Absolutely. And this will be my last question because then I have to hop off. But I think that
Of
it's
course, thank you.
absolutely everybody's responsibility. And I think even privilege to understand what is going on in reality and share that truth with the rest of the world, because it is every single day getting worse and worse, both from just the aspect of fake news dominating every aspect of our lives. It is just impossible to know what is real and what isn't if you're a regular person scrolling through social media. And the more people that say something, the more true it becomes. So just to have the power in numbers of sharing the truth when we find out what did the IDF say or what actually happened, that has real power to change minds of what's going on the ground. And on another note, what the other thing that people in the diaspora have, I think the responsibility, but also the privilege to do, is to go out and protest and rally in support of Israel, because the rallies and protests against Israel are not slowing down. They're not stopping. And I know right now it's summer vacation, but as soon as the school year starts, which is in really just a few weeks, it's going to pop back up and it's going to be worse than before. And
They
so I
have been
think,
preparing all summer, and
right,
we have been afraid and coping all summer,
or
and
being
they're
in
very much
denial.
ahead of the game.
Yeah, or being in denial all summer. And it's very easy to be
Very
in
much.
denial. I very frequently
Mhm.
live in denial about the fact that these protests are going to come back stronger than ever. But the Jewish community, I mean, I'm from LA, where I live down the block from where that, for lack of a better word, pogrom happened just a couple months ago on Pico.
Yeah.
And it was so distressing first, like my family was there, and it was so distressing to see how few people came out on the pro-Israel side in comparison to the anti-Israel side. And even if you're a person who, doesn't want to get into a fist fight, because, violence is not the answer. We should not be taking these people on head on, but to show up in a crowd in numbers is the best thing people could be doing. Literally just show up with an Israeli flag. Don't engage with the protesters. You're not going to convince them of anything. They're going to be wearing masks and keffiyeh, so you're not going to be able to have a human eye-to-eye conversation anyway. But just to have people out in numbers makes such a difference to deterring the other side from just running wild and doing whatever they want. And it does so much to strengthen Jews in Israel to see what's going on our behalf.
You're right about that. I know that it very much is a morale booster for all of our soldiers who really do struggle with that every single day when they do hear about things that are happening. And I know that the soldiers are actually predominantly cut out of social media. So the information that they get comes maybe from word of mouth, from letters. We get letters from all over the world that are sent to soldiers that we share with
Not
them.
really. Soldiers are as active on social media as anybody.
But so that's what I was going to ask you, is that in the beginning it was very limited. Are you saying that now they are able to be more engaged and without fear? I mean, even tonight, I had like 7 different individuals who were joining us. And for one reason or another, they were instructed that they were not allowed to join us for a live program, where their face would be showing and their name would be shown and information could be shared about what they were experiencing in the field, whether it be in Gaza or in the north or even in Judea and Samaria.
Oh, I
Do you
see what
feel
you're
like that
saying.
that's changing?
No, and so I thought you meant getting access to social media. I think everybody is on their phones
Yeah,
during
right.
their free time and they're being able to see what's going on around the world on their Instagrams, on their
Mm.
Facebooks. But you're right. I mean, it is a tough thing to balance when you want to share your story, but you do have to go through approvals, and I understand right now why um people would be withdrawing approvals during this crazy time. I obviously have no idea what jobs these people have that make them more sensitive or one way or the other. But I finished reserves for my second round yesterday, so I'm a civilian completely now. Um, so I'm
How's it feel? How does
oh,
it
it was
feel?
good.
You miss it?
I missed it at I was dying to go back when I was out of reserves. I was out for a few months. And then I went back and it was tough. So I'm happy to be on a calmer day today. With that, I do have to go though.
I want to thank you, Rachel. I hope that other people will be aware of the great videos that you guys are putting out so that they too can be a soldier of a different kind. And that kind of
Thank you.
unity is what will save Israel. So thank you for your voice and for your continued involvement. And we look forward to working together with you guys to do all
Sounds
of the
great.
we need to do to save Israel today. So
Amen.
thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Rachel. My best to you.
Have a good one.
Bye. So we're back. And what a treat that we were able to have Rachel join us tonight because, as I mentioned earlier, we have a new situation that has prevented on duty and active duty soldiers who are in reserves from being able to talk with us a little bit. And that's okay because I have spent these months collecting stories. And some of the stories that we've been collecting over this time, they border on heartbreaking devastation, very difficult moral choices that have to be made, um, impossible situations, even the dilemmas being faced by having to answer questions about their experience in their own families or with their friends, because there's an element of the fight on the battlefield that can never, ever be translated. And we know that, and we remain limited in our ability to get deep into that experience. But for the first time, almost ever, unfortunately, on October 7th, we saw how much the digital sharing could influence what the world knows. And we know that the massacre was live streamed by the murderers themselves. So we know also that IDF soldiers have been able to go in for their actions, whether it is in Gaza, the Judea and Samaria in the north, and they too are wearing these cameras, which allows them to capture direct experiences and confrontations with the terrorists. When we hear them from the outside and we hear the gunfire and we hear the RPG fire, it is shocking to our system. Imagine living within it. Well, our soldiers are the voices of reason within those horrific situations. I met with one soldier who was there in Nahal Oz base on in his reserve service, and I had the privilege of being able to walk through this base that had been infiltrated and hear the tragic stories of what took place to the soldiers. 40 soldiers on the base. It was, of course, being the Simchat Torah holiday, and so the base was not as populated as it might have otherwise been, but it was also a Shabbat. And so in general, Army units are, distilled a little bit on this on these holy days for our people. The attack was brutal, and the soldiers under this attack somehow managed to even save themselves were able to save themselves from the burning Hamal, the emergency command center, where unfortunately the terrorists had poured gasoline around the outside that seeped through the ceiling. And then they were burned alive. And in this process, we have a recording of the soldier, the tatzpanit, the onlookers, the observers, as they're called, calm, reporting over the radio what is happening. calm in her voice. And while standing in this room, I thought to myself what it takes for somebody to have that level of self-control, even when they know the end is coming. And people who are immersed in trauma care, trauma treatment, we know that in severe traumatic situations, the person can either go one way or the other, either very stressed and erratic or very calm. And this young woman's voice continues to echo in my ears as I heard her voice while standing in the place where she was murdered. And yet I could not wrap my mind around the instance itself because I'm an outsider. And like many of you, we who do not have Army service to compare to, we don't know in our immediate family Army service stories. And especially as diaspora Jews, many of us have not been privileged to hear some of those painful elements of trauma that Israeli soldiers so often have to cope with throughout their lives. That outsider feeling it's tough. It's tough to bridge. And so again, my sharing of the stories that I've inherited is a way that I hope others can be inspired by the soldiers who have put their bravery face forward and have become heroes in our time. Many of those heroes fell on October 7th, like in Nahal Oz, as I've shared. Other heroes who fell, they fell also at the Nova massacre, where they tried desperately to save lives, in Be'eri, and in other communities all over this terrible attack. I really recommend to people, by the way, to go and look at oct7map.com. This is the oct7map.com is an interactive website that allows you to move in between the sites of massacre on October 7th so that you can learn the names. And you'll notice, by the way, that there is, of course, the Nahal Oz base and the Nahal Oz kibbutz. So you get to see the distinction between the locations on the map. Where were they infiltrated? How were they attempting these acts of defense? And it gives you stories of each individual fallen soldier and citizen. One of the stories that we've been privileged to share is of a soldier who miraculously survived because he was rescued by a Bedouin Arab. And it is a wonderful story that we hope that you will go and look at on our website. It is Atir Vinikov, a young man whose story inspires and who has given such insight through his experience that he's actually starting to now do some speaking opportunities. So for those of you looking for a unique story to bring to your community, please look no further than reaching out to us and let us bring to you the direct voices of soldiers like Atir's. Now, Atir, surviving Nova with his friends and surviving by being hidden by a Bedouin Muslim Arab, and then immediately receiving on his cell phone a command to arrive, Tzav Shmona, as it's called, to arrive for emergency detail service to his base. And while he received the message, he told his commanding officer that he was in the process of surviving. But by 6 a.m. the next morning, there he was in uniform at his reserve base. What does that teach us about the commitment of our soldiers? Then there are the soldiers who continue to tell the stories of what it is like inside of Gaza. The soldiers who are talking about being face to face with a threatening reality, eliminating terrorists, finding tunnels underneath the beds of children, seeing again and again the type of anti-Semitic propaganda that they find in nearly every single home that they visit. They are seeing Mein Kampf and other Hitler and Nazi-focused propaganda in Arabic. They are witnessing games of killing Jews as in the kindergartens. They're seeing evidence of the brainwashing, and they're seeing it, and then they're continuing their fight. And I asked one of the soldiers who I've met with, how does it help? Does it help them feel a determination in their battle? And they say that every time they're reminded of just how much hate is ingrained in these people, it helps remind them that they are fighting the war of good. that they are the defense against this evil of terrorism. They're also a part of the logic that has to be integrated into this battle. For example, moral dilemmas that they face. Soldiers shared with me that one day they walked into a home and a woman was standing surrounded by 5 or 6 little children with one in her arms, screaming, "Shoot me, shoot us all." Imagine the soldier in that moment. And we've had to imagine soldiers in extreme moments, especially since many of us learned that shocking day that there were hostages who were waving a white flag, but they were mistaken for being terrorists. And so the IDF soldiers mistakenly took the lives of these hostages. It was understandable how confusing the situation can be, but after the fact, very often we are judgmental, pointing a finger of blame. There are things that are causing us to point a finger of blame, even when we ask our innocent soldiers, how do you cope with these situations? I had a soldier who was asked, where do you sleep while you are in Gaza? And he explained that everywhere around you, there are terrorists. Where do we sleep? We have to sleep in a bed in a home that has already been cleared of terrorists. And of course, the young diaspora teenager who was asking the question says, what do you mean? You sleep in their beds? How terrible of you, making it as if the soldier was somehow wrong because they had to sleep while this ongoing battle raged everywhere around them. Or that they prayed. How could you pray in someone else's home, in a Muslim individual's home in Gaza? So the questions that are being targeted to the soldiers are often very off-putting. It reminds me in some way of the questions that used to be asked of survivors of the Holocaust. How did you survive? And these questions were also asked on October 7th. How did you survive when someone else did not? And the soldiers are being asked the same question. How did you survive? How are you making it through when so many others did not? We want to do our best to humanize the Israeli soldiers in every way and in every forum. They are being maligned in every media outlet and physically attacked while on the ground. They're not allowed to defend themselves when they get attacked, and they are delegitimized for their own role in defense, being accused of being occupation forces. Their task is to keep Israel secure, to root out terror infrastructure, and yet the hate against the Israeli soldier is being increasingly justified. Hearing the stories that I've shared, and these are just a few, and this is really so much tip of an iceberg of what I wish that I could share, but you can go and you can look at the IDF spokesperson's unit, and you can look at the IDF website, you can read their blogs, you can look at all of the different soldier pages that are out there that focus on sharing as much of the soldier's voice as they can. We have to be their voice, because whereas, yes, as Rachel was just sharing with us, now they are allowed access to social media, they're not allowed to use the same courage that they use in the battlefield, on the battlefield of public opinion. For that, they need each one of us to be soldiers. No other national army is as indicted in the world as the Israeli army, and no other soldier is held to the impossible standard of behavior and inquiry that is imposed on them. These young men and women, they're under constant barrage of assaults, and we have to be a part of their defense forces. We need to know about the moral limitations, the moral guidelines that they are given as soldiers. It is visible, it is easily accessible. The guidelines of every Israel Defense Forces soldier, Jewish and non, because we have to tell the world our soldiers are not just Jews, they are also Christian, they're also Muslim, Arab, and yes, of course, the Druze, who right now are so deeply in our hearts after the massacre of the Druze children of Majd al-Shams, who were killed by an Iranian proxy missile fired by Hezbollah and murdering 14 children and wounding more than 30 others. These Druze communities serve as proud soldiers in the Israel Defense Forces, and it is our job to make sure the world does not demonize them any longer, and that they hold up Israeli soldiers as the fighters of freedom, not only for the Jewish state, but actually for all of humanity. You heard Rachel just share that even while we're fighting our own war, we are busy training to assist on disasters anywhere else in the world. And you've seen how Israel and other organizations send our soldiers out to every situation where a soldier is needed. Israel is there. They are fighting not only for freedom in the Jewish sovereign state and making sure that all of our citizens of every faith are able to live freely, but they are also a part of fighting all of humanity and our ancient historical battle. They are a reflection of the call for justice that encouraged even the partisan fighters in the forests, the underground movements in the ghettos, Israeli soldiers, native born and volunteers from around the world, because yes, let us share the love with our lone soldiers who are volunteers from the diaspora. Let's also remember there are lone soldiers even in Israel. Soldiers who chose to maybe disconnect from their families, who didn't believe in serving in the army, and so they too are alone. And those who come from underprivileged families, and those who are able to dedicate their whole heart and soul to whatever faction of the army they are able to serve, including those with special needs. This inclusive army is a model for all humanity, and your voice is needed to make sure others know about these truths. They not only defend our nation on all fronts of conceptual and logistical strategy, because they are very much a part of planning and executing the elimination of active threats. One of the units that we've been working with has been the Yatar unit. This is an external unit of the IDF where their job is in ATV terrain vehicles to be able to infiltrate active terrorist activity and pull out soldiers in order to save their lives. These soldiers are of every walk of life in the unit. They are women and men and Haredim and secular, and yet together, when they gather, they have a feeling of unity. In Yatar and in every other unit of the army, unity is something that is holding the IDF together, and it is holding our country strong. This is something we hope that the rest of the world can continue to find within themselves, putting politics to the side and allowing our social justice cause to be the cause of Jewish rights and Jewish humanity and the Jewish state, so that all of our citizens, Jewish and non, can live free in this stunning, exemplary society that is anything but apartheid, that is anything but occupationist, anything but militaristic. And it is only a society that seeks good. Even the rallies that somehow are dividing us here and there, they too are directed for a cause of good. And we have some soldiers who have joined these alternative movements. And so the world becomes very confused. Who do you believe? This former Mossad agent and this former general, or that one? And I think it's important for every single one of us, citizens of Israel and virtual citizens of Israel alike, to find a way to navigate through the political divides and to say that we can learn from the stories and perspectives of all of our soldiers. There's one former soldier who we have relied extensively on his expertise, Avi Melamed. Maybe you've seen one of the interviews that I have conducted with him or heard our podcast that we did together, so that you can gain insight into how a soldier also relates to Middle Eastern affairs in a general capacity, but also Jewish education in a particular one. Because once they're out of uniform, these soldiers still have more to teach us. Daniel Fleisch, who is a former lone soldier and was part of our Lone Soldier Project, went on to speak in many avenues. He has found himself a good and important role as a spokesperson there in the diaspora. Soldiers' voices continuing to be instrumental to how well we can not only understand but articulate our fight for freedom. Now, most will not tell you stories of the battlefield. They will not share situations where a mother or a woman is surrounding herself with children as human shields, or a father shoving his child forward, screaming, "Shoot him, shoot him." Imagining this is hard enough for us. We have to remember that behind these soldiers are individuals with families, dreams, and aspirations. The fifth grade Bible teacher is a commando fighter, a kindergarten teacher commander is an intelligence officer, a flamboyant neighbor is a tank platoon commander. And one of our favorite Israeli bands created a song to exemplify exactly this diversity that exists within our units and amongst our soldiers. We want to inherit that heroism from them as well. They exhibit resilience, determination, and a deep sense of camaraderie as they navigate complex and volatile situations. Their acts of bravery and selflessness extend far beyond the battlefield, and many IDF soldiers continue to be involved in humanitarian efforts, even when they are outside of their service duty, even when they are not volunteering as their soldiers. So we want to be able to round out tonight's program with some words from the soldiers themselves. And this is a letter that is written by a 24-year-old lone soldier who was in the Givati Brigade. Those of us on the front lines know how to ignore the international news, as anti-Semites everywhere distort the truth, blame Israel for acting disproportionately and with disregard for Gazan civilian life. Some outright say we are monsters and commit genocide. It becomes essential for every decent human being in the world to understand what the IDF is and the moral fiber of which we are made. I was having breakfast at a family's friend's house when I got a text telling me to come back to base as soon as possible. I returned to the base on the complete other side of the country with a couple of hours to receive orders, and we were on high alert. Hamas's rockets and the continuing terror attacks all around me were soldiers from every walk of life. Secular Tel Avivians, Ethiopians, kibbutznikim, religious Jews from the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, as they should be known, Americans, French, Russian, every walk of life, of city kid and country kid, from Jerusalem and everywhere that there are Jews. We were all together in this fight to defend all the citizens of Israel. We had standing with us Arabs and Christians and Muslims, and we were all empowered because we knew we were here to bring justice after the aftermath of the horrific actions of Hamas on October 7th. We knew that this united us all. So as we spend every ounce of our energy guarding the borders and inside of Gaza, seeking out our hostages, looking for the terrorists in order to eliminate them and to allow the future of peace to become possible, we have also been blessed with donations of food and clothing and toiletries from Israelis and Jews all over the world. Some as simple as children's drawings that have graced our tents, that have been inside our tanks, and are folded in our pockets, helping to give us strength. As the weeks continue and the rocket fire doesn't seem to be coming to an end, it threatens our sanity and our spirit. And we, the soldiers, are prepared for every possible operation. We enter each one with a mission to destroy terror, to disable the networks, to stop infiltrations, to take out the terror tunnels infrastructure, to stop their ability of carrying out attacks, and above all, to allow our citizens to live free because we are here to defend them. Certainly, we would rather be home with family and friends like normal kids our age, eating mom's cooking, playing guitar, going out, hanging at the beach. None of us wanted war, but when Israel came under attack, we are proud and we will continue to be proud to defend the country we love. And we hope everyone out there in the world can be proud to stand up for the soldiers that are the Israel Defense Forces. The letters and the words of these soldiers can bring you to tears. There are other letters that maybe you have read, you should be sharing, helping other people to understand, because there are many fallen soldiers who have left for us letters such as these that we are able to share with others to open their minds and open their hearts. Their stories of bravery and sacrifice, they serve as a testament to the enduring spirit of the Maccabees, of King David, of every generation of Jewish fighter. We have to become Israel strong, just like our soldiers. We have to learn from their lessons. And we invite you to join our Israel Strong program, where we're going to be bringing Israeli soldier reservists and experts in physical and mental empowerment training programs that you'll be able to access from wherever you are in the world as virtual citizens of Israel. We look forward to being able to help you feel strong, feel that you are courageous and able to even take on physical threats as they continue to rise all around us. Because the lies are extreme and the threats are frightening. They are calling for our murder, for the genocide of Jews everywhere. And we do not want to be naive. We do not want to be accused of paranoia. No, we want to avoid panic and begin preparation by learning from our soldiers how we too can be soldiers. Whether it's watching old films of Israeli soldiers or modern day social media reels and shorts that the IDF spokespersons unit and the Israeli citizens spokespersons unit and others are putting out. Find them, share them, be a part of the digital army that we need. As virtual citizens of Israel, you can do more. You can share your voice, join Israel Forever, or whatever local group you might have. We have so much more that we can do to learn from Israel's fight for freedom and to inherit exactly the courage we need from these young soldiers. We want to be able to empower our young as well, to admire the soldiers of Israel, to understand that they too are part of this battle. You are able with Israel Forever not only to send personal letters and drawings and to help contribute to our distribution of these wonderful messages and blessings to the soldiers themselves. We also want to give you the opportunity to give Guardians of Israel gift cards where you can gift food and food money, not only for the soldiers, but also for their families, for the emergency staples that they need in their life. You also can are welcome to bring soldiers to speak in your community. And we are so honored to continue to bring you opportunity after opportunity to feel the connection with Israel and our soldiers come to life. Not only is it something that we can watch from a distance, but we can feel a part of it. And so we're so grateful for your participation tonight in our program. We hope that you have gotten some glimpse into 10 months of war and how it is our job to help them in their battle and to keep their morale up and to know the fight is not yet over.